Cloud. There we go.
Great, thank you. Welcome, everyone. Give folks just a minute here to get connected. You're welcome if you want in the beginning here to turn on your video and say hello, but also please feel free to turn it off as I get going if you prefer, although I definitely anticipate having lots of conversation and back and forth in the chat. So you're also welcome to leave it on, but I know sometimes by the afternoon folks are a little zoomed out, so don't feel like you have to. But it's great to see folks' faces. Also feel free to unmute and say hello or say hello in the chat. We'll give it just another minute to see. I think we should have, let's see. Oh, we're up to about 54 people. We had about 100 and last time I looked, I think we had 117 people registered. So we'll give it maybe one more minute. I heard the weather's really nice there in Iowa. Is that true? Yes.
Yeah, I decided to come outside.
Oh, yay. Nice. It looks really nice. Where are you? Do you mind, where are you kind of, you don't have to like tell your exact location. Are you sort of like in the middle of the state or the Northeast or?
The lower part, central.
Okay. Well, it looks beautiful. Hey guys, see a few more people hopping on here. Oh my gosh, 43. Yeah, it's nice here today too. I think we're gonna go out and get our Christmas tree this afternoon. I used to live and work in Iowa and I'm in Massachusetts now. And we are gonna get a nor'easter tomorrow and it's gonna be like rain and wind and maybe a little snow. So we're enjoying it. We're enjoying it today here. All right, well, it looks like we've got a good number of folks, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So welcome to our first Friday of the month Substance Misuse Prevention webinar series. We have one of these webinars the first Friday of every month and choose a topic that cuts across prevention projects. And so it's not specific to any grant or project, just anyone who's interested in prevention in Iowa is welcome to join us. Just a little bit of housekeeping really briefly before we jump into it and get started. This meeting is being recorded. So if you could mute when not speaking, that would be great. Please feel free though to unmute at any point. For those of you who know me, or even if you don't know me, you'll probably figure out pretty quickly that I am a very flexible trainer. I love it when people want to pop in and share an example or an idea or a counterpoint. If I'm saying something and you're thinking, yeah, that's not really how it worked where I lived, like absolutely feel free to unmute and jump in. Also to use the chat box throughout. We have it set with the chat so that you can send a chat to Jody, who is in the background as our producer on Zoom today, which I really appreciate. So if you're having any technical issues, or even if you just have something that you'd like to share that you'd rather share anonymously and not have your name connected to it, you are welcome to message those to Jody. Otherwise, it's set so that you can message and everyone will see it. And that includes if you want to send something to me, you can either send it through Jody or send it out to everybody. You're always though welcome to send me an email with any thoughts, feedback, whatever it might be. Following today's webinar, you will get an email with a copy of the presentation and the recording and also your CEU certificate. It does take me about 2 weeks to get those together and get them out. And when I say 2 weeks, I mean literally like probably 2 weeks from today on Friday, maybe the following Monday. By then I have everything I need pulled together to be able to get them back to folks. If for some reason you need it quicker because you're applying for certification or you just need your CEU certificate sooner, definitely email me and reach out. It's not a problem. It just takes about that long for me to get them back out to all the folks that joined. And so just a quick word about myself. I am your presenter once again today, although we do have we'll be shifting back to rotating some other presenters and bringing some additional folks with some expertise in starting next month. But you guys have me for one more webinar this month in our which really sort of turned into an informal series around building capacity and thinking about strengthening coalitions and relationships. My name's Claire Grace Jones. I go by Claire Grace. I'm a training consultant and project manager, just part-time with the Iowa Department of Public Health. I also work as a training director for another Department of Public Health's grant-funded project. I've worked in prevention and public health for I think last time I added, it's like somewhere between 12 and 15 years. I've been doing this for a while. I love prevention. I also work further along the continuum now in supporting folks that have lived experience and work in supporting others that are in recovery, which I love. I worked both as a community prevention specialist and did direct work in a community working with a coalition, also working on tobacco prevention. I've worked as a prevention supervisor and director, also as a capacity coach and a trainer. So I feel fortunate that it gives me some breadth of experience that I know lots of you from when I did direct work or some consulting and training with folks, and that hopefully it helps for me to be able to bring some different layers to the information that I'm going to share with you today. So just to give an overview of what we're going to talk about during the webinar today, we shared, for those of you who get the flyer, I pulled this right from the flyer. This, like I said, is kind of the last in our informal series around capacity building and increasing engagement. Our bird's eye view for today is thinking about not just getting the right people around the table, but then thinking about how to continue to increase and strengthen and formalize those relationships. In today's webinar, we're really just going to look at lots of different tools and resources that you can use to do that. So we'll start by looking at some general definitions, resources, and tools. We're going to look specifically at some tools for thinking about culturally competent collaboration and capacity building. We'll look at a continuum for addressing racial inequity, and then how to increase and formalize collaborations. We'll take a few minutes closer to the end to think about how we might want to be specific in thinking about how we do this work in the time of COVID. And then we'll have time at the end also for questions and discussion. But again, please don't feel free like you have to hold your questions to the end. I definitely, want people to feel free to share throughout. And for some reason, I'm having a little trouble seeing my chat at the same time that this is up. So Jody, if you can just help monitor the chat, that would be really helpful. Thank you. So we're going to start with just a brief video on collaboration. I think I wanted to say too for folks, I did have a note here for myself. Some of this might be familiar to folks. I'm sure that there will be something for everyone to glean somewhere. For those of you maybe who've been doing this work for a long time, I know there's often folks that are newer. I feel like anytime you do something in prevention, you get people that have been doing this work for 30 years, and then you get somebody who says like, yeah, it's my second day and somebody told me to be here. For those of you who might already be really familiar and have been doing this for a while, I was thinking about one of the things we're going to talk about as we get further into the training is this idea of not just being the one to hold this knowledge yourself, but to be able to educate and share that with your coalition, with the other folks in the community that you work with. This idea of, and thinking about the strategic prevention framework that we really organize our prevention work around, that it's not just about doing the work, but it's about educating folks about the process and really bringing them into the process of what you're doing. And I think that's absolutely true when it comes to capacity building and increasing collaboration as well, that it's not just about taking this tool to a meeting and using it, but really educating and working with your coalition about why this is important and how you do it and why you're choosing the tools that you're choosing, or why you're, asking for some leadership to do this with folks that you're interested in creating some additional partnerships with. And so I would just offer, if this is something that feels somewhat familiar, to maybe look at it through that lens as well, of how you might be able to take these resources and then use them to educate others. And also for anyone, as I said, please jump in if you've got some specific thoughts and examples as we go along. So we'll just start with this little fun video in the beginning here.
Hey.
Some problems are just too big and too complex for any one person to handle alone. For these challenges, we need to collaborate. But what does that mean? Collaboration is more than just working together with others. To really work together effectively, especially when resources are tight, we need to invest in good collaboration. Good collaboration means sharing the responsibilities, risks, benefits, and the credit. Good collaboration also means that everyone who is involved works toward a common goal. To do that, we need to know our limitations, leave our ego at the door, keep an open mind, be physically and mentally present, ensure everyone has an equal voice, invest trust to get trust, step out of our comfort zone, value each other's contributions. There are many benefits of a good collaboration, such as engaged and empowered members, increased capacity to solve complex problems, strong relationships grounded in trust, honesty, and respect, efficient use of resources, and a greater overall impact. Remember, we are stronger when we work together. Alone, we can do so little. Together, we can do so much.
All right. And I'm curious right off the bat if anybody's got an example that they want to share in the chat of when they had a collaboration with your coalition or with something you were doing in prevention that really made something happen that your coalition wasn't able to do on their own. Or if anybody wants to unmute, if you want to just give a real brief example. I'm trying to bring up my chat here. Whoops. Hey, Jen.
Hey, did you want us to do this via chat or this?
You can, unmute. Go for it. All my examples come from Delaware County anyway, so go ahead and.
Oh, gotcha.
Go ahead and let it go.
Maybe I'm going to use yours. Definitely social host. The passing of social host. We got told no by the Board of Supervisors until we had the backing of the sheriff's office. So having that partnership and then bringing the actual sheriff to the meeting and having his voice heard is when it got passed. So couldn't have done it without, yeah.
And with that relationship, I know that relationship took a lot of time. And how much would you say did it take being like, I don't want to use the word formal because I don't think there was like an MOU at that point of like, and the sheriff will agree to do this. And well, at the point that it was just coming to the Board of Supervisors, but formal in the sense that it took some like real clear, like, we would really like you to be able to speak to this. And will you agree to do that? Like, I don't know if you want to speak just a little bit about that.
Well, I wasn't the actual coordinator working on that strategy at the time, but I know Mel had to do a couple meetings with him to show him why he needed that in his tool belt too, that, or him and his officers.
Yes.
So there had to be education to both parties actually. So it took a little, here's why, you know how it was.
Yeah.
But that was one of those things that he came through and it was passed, but needed many partners in order to get it done.
Yes. Well, and that's the other piece too, if I recall. I mean, we had a couple of really strong coalition leaders, but also some very strong vocal coalition members. And that was a county that definitely, while the role of the prevention agency and the prevention leader, I think, was appreciated, it was absolutely necessary to have like the more like formal voices of, you know, people speaking at meetings, people being the one to go talk to the sheriff, people being the ones to put things in the newspaper, that those had to be local voices. It had to be like the local public health person, the local school district person, that like they were like, that's great that your agency wants to be on the agenda, and like, we'll hear what you have to say, but we also want to know like what the voices in this community want to say about this. And that's when it got a lot more like solidified, I would say. Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah. Thanks, Jen. And Jody, was there anything else in the chat that you want to read off for us?
There is nothing in the chat at this time.
Okay, then I am going to move on. So that feels like a good segue to continue on. Again, you know, I feel like some of this seems like things like we know, but also I know for myself that often looking at it this way and hearing it is such a good solidifying reminder. Or when I was newer to doing prevention, or newer to doing the work in this way, to doing it in this really collaborative way, that this was helpful. I like this particular resource, and we're going to actually look at a few spots in a minute that I drew particularly from in pulling this together, but I wanted to share this one first as kind of an overarching resource from some of them were originally created by the CAPT and now live with, and some of them were also created by Prevention Solutions, and they now all live with Prevention Solutions at EDC. But you know, why collaborate? It seems some of these reasons seem obvious, but I think some of them are really really important to be able to implement the work in the way that we're implementing it, and to make environmental change. You know, we're not just talking about being able to implement one program, but when you're talking about being able to pass a policy, you're talking about being able to, you know, not just do a single parenting class, but to maybe work with another organization to do multiple parenting classes and to integrate that as part of what they're doing as the services they offer. Or to think about, you know, not just how to make an impact on this small group of folks, but how to really make significant change that makes environmental change, that you can't do it without collaboration. So obviously it increases your access to local resources. And again, we've talked about, you know, that this is about people, it's about technical knowledge and skills that people can bring to your coalition, and about those gatekeepers and those connections, that being able to bring someone in and have them collaborate with you also then gives you the ability to leverage those relationships. It builds your knowledge, and it also builds prevention knowledge. You know, as we're doing the work, it's so important to be talking about how and why we're doing it. You know, why do we use the SPIF? Why is it so important to be building cultural competence and capacity and sustainability and all the things that we're doing? And in doing that, we're really rippling out that prevention knowledge and making for a stronger community in doing that. It really is the only way, I think, that I know of, that we're able to implement and see success with environmental strategies with some strong collaboration. It can help us ensure cultural relevance. Also, it increases capacity to address related behavioral health problems. We all know how closely tied other behavioral health issues are with substance misuse and problem gambling and suicide prevention and other conditions that might be comorbid with what we're doing. And so increasing our capacity to bring in folks that might be working on related issues and having that strength in being able to collaborate and coordinate and support the work that we're each doing to reach shared outcomes and shared goals is really essential also to to the work and to the health of our communities. Obviously we can get more done. I mean, I know that little video that I showed in the beginning was kind of silly, but you know, truly being able to, you know, 1 and 1 we know is much more than 3, much more than 5 when you're talking about bringing folks together around the table. And again, it builds sustainability. You know, we're funded for just, you know, so many years to do our grant specific work potentially, or we're you know, our job roles and responsibilities are focused on, you know, whatever specific outcomes they might be in this time related fashion, and being able to do the work in this way, increasing other folks' knowledge, increasing other people's engagement and ownership in the work that we're doing, and then working to formalize those agreements really build sustainability so that the work can continue on beyond when there's specific funding allocated for it. And then the link to the each of these slides, this particular one came, like I said, from this resource about why we should collaborate, and the link to the resources right there at the bottom, and folks will get copies of these slides. I'll mail them out with the follow-up materials. So speaking of, just wanted to highlight a couple of resources. Again, you know, today's webinar is really more about just sharing a whole bunch of things with you that I have found helpful or useful that you might want to take a look at and utilize. And so a couple of places that I have really looked to and found have some great resources. This is definitely high on my list. Prevention, collaboration, and action. As I said, some of you may have been familiar when this was a project of the CAPT, and when the CAPT's funding ended, a lot of their work remained at EDC and shifted to prevention solutions. And so I am so thankful for the great work that they continue to do, and that also a lot of things that had previously been created, you're still able to have access to. I definitely recommend checking out this resource. I love that they, like you can see from here, there's a tools tab, there's an explore by topic tab. So if you want to look up things specific to working on prescription drug misuse in your community, you want to look up something specific to opioids, you're really working right now on capacity building, whatever it might be, you can toggle the resources different ways. They also have a variety of types of, you know, there's checklists, and there's what I was just referencing is kind of this. I'll show you guys what it looks like. You know, they have lots of these really nice, just kind of like one pagers that give the topic, and they're bulleted, and they have some nice information. These would be great to share, you know, again, with other community collaborators or coalition members. They've also got some like success stories and things like that. So this is a really nice resource I wanted to share with folks. Also, most of you are familiar with CADGA. I put their main website on here, but I'm going to show you a couple of things that I pulled specifically from the Cultural Competence Primer. It looks like it's been updated. It has a different look than the last time I went to pull it to utilize for something, and I found it incredibly useful, and if you haven't seen it already, would definitely recommend that you check this out. Their primers are great for they have a primer for each of the steps and for really doing some good coalition work, and so I definitely suggest taking a look at that. I didn't in this presentation end up linking to anything specific, but I did want to mention, I think I may have, for some folks, you may recognize that I've mentioned this website in the past. It's called Coalition's Work. I love that basically they have this entire section of tools and resources specific to what we're talking about today. They have a member skills inventory, which I think is great if you want to think about the skills you already have at the table and where you might want to look outward to bring in some additional skills. They have a coalition gap analysis. They have a tool for thinking about partnering with different community sectors. And that one is a really nice one because it's got some talking points for if you want to connect with the faith community, if you want to connect more with youth. It's got some nice talking points in there to think about how to frame that conversation. And I know that we talked about that in one of the previous webinars, that sometimes doing this work and thinking about how you're really building capacity and sustainability is thinking about also the process and how you can engage others in then doing this work and engaging others and creating and formalizing partnerships. And so often having things like talking points to be able to get coalition members feeling really comfortable to go and talk to the sheriff, go and talk to someone from the board of supervisors, talk to somebody from the local business community about why you want to create a partnership with them to support the work that you're doing. Having things sometimes written or opportunities for folks to practice that can be really helpful. And then I did want to share, somebody had asked in a recent webinar, and also it came up in the survey that we did after the fact, and in looking for some feedback and things that people thought would be helpful. There was a request for, are there some more kind of formal, not formal, but just documents or templates or tools for thinking about creating, increasing capacity and some of that piece of this work. And so while it's not required at the moment necessarily for work that folks are doing, the workbook that we created, we actually created it originally for folks that were around for SPIF-SIG and then reformatted for IPFS. We actually also adapted, I think, a version of this for a couple other projects when we were looking at some things around methamphetamine and a couple other things, so it might look familiar in different iterations to folks. But it's still available, and actually a lot of the tools and trainings are still available on the Iowa PFS website. So if you're not familiar with it, I think it's definitely worth checking out. There's some nice, if you look to the project deliverables, there's some nice things that you could just take what you like from them and utilize them if they're helpful for you. And if they're not, then, you could take them or leave them. There's also, as I said, some nice archived trainings in there if you are interested. So also, I definitely am mindful that even though I lived in the Midwest for a whole bunch of years, I am back on the East Coast, and I know that I tend to speak quickly, especially when I'm excited about something. So I'm going to take a breath and slow down a little bit as we transition forward here. I wanted to start a little more broadly, and then we're going to narrow in a little bit. And so I thought I'd just share briefly two things from this capacity workbook that I think could be helpful. And so the first one is this: if it's not something that you're doing already, obviously when you're thinking about collaboration and increasing and formalizing your collaborative relationships, the first thing you need to do is know what you have going on already. So, who do you already have at your table? What are the things that they bring? And then what else exists in your county already? What efforts are already happening that you want to think about not duplicating? And then what efforts are already happening that you want to think about where there might be alignment for you to tap into or to have some partnerships and agreements around. And so resource mapping is a really nice way to think about collaborating around programs and services. And so within that guide, there's some information about how to do that and how you can really build on the county's strengths to move forward in providing services. It's a nice way to identify new resources, avoid duplication, cultivate new partners and relationships. It's also a nice way just to be able to share information across agencies. In doing this project originally, we encouraged sites to create some sort of word art or some other visual representation of who are all the agencies and organizations in your county that touch prevention in some way. And it was really, I think people were really surprised when they sat down at the table to say, well, we know the usual folks, we know there's our prevention coalition, and we know there's a tobacco coalition, and there's a domestic violence coalition, and there's a prevention agency. But then when they really started to put it down on paper, realizing that there was an initiative happening within the faith community, and that the maybe the Chamber of Commerce, had an interest in some things that they were doing and might have a connection in some way. And so be able to really sit down and formalize what that looked like, to say, here's what it looks like currently, and here's how we're sort of connected. It's also really interesting for folks, I think, to take this kind of visual mapping and thinking about, who are the players in our community that touch problem gambling or that touch substance misuse prevention, and how are they connected? It was often really interesting to see folks have a realization that while maybe it's great that the prevention agency has this real presence and strength in your community, that a lot of what was happening sort of in the middle here with the prevention agency and the coalition all sort of went out in one direction. And it was like, well, we do the work and we sort of do this over here and we share this and we tell them about this and we tell them about this. And there was a realization that there wasn't a lot of collaboration happening. There wasn't necessarily then an effort by other organizations to connect back to what was happening and to think about how to share their information and resources in a way to build sustainability and to build capacity. Or it may be the recognition that maybe there was a large community organization or a foundation that had a connection to lots of other initiatives, but not necessarily to what the coalition or the prevention agency was working on. And it was really a way to be able to visually identify that. So this is something that I definitely think is worth, even if it's something that's not required of you, in the current moment with your funding, definitely something that's worth really thinking about taking the time to do with your coalition or with your, prevention team. This is doing, we said last month, I think, that doing prevention work for sure, we want to be doing the SPIF and we want to be doing it through a coalition, but we may have strategies that we're also working on with other sectors or other partners, and thinking about doing this in all of the work that we do really makes a lot of sense. The other thing that one of the other things that's in that workbook that I like is this tool that we created to think about listing these organizations and maybe, it's sort of a chicken and an egg, maybe you do this piece first and then you put it all on the map, or you start by sort of doing this map and then drilling it down to this piece. But thinking about, who are all of the organizations and groups that are operating within our community? What kinds of things did they provide? And then I really think this middle part is key. What are the things? What is their mission? What are their goals? What are their expected outcomes? Why are they doing the things that they're doing with youth? Like, what is it that they really want to see change or happen? What are the things that we want to see change or happen? Because right there at that shared outcomes is where you can come together to strengthen your message and their message by working collaboratively and formalizing those relationships. And so it really is a key piece of thinking about all this, and then being able to do the things that we've talked about and the things that we know in terms of saying, great, so are they already part of what we're doing? And if they're not, how might we make that connection? Is it that my neighbor is, best friends with the pastor, and so she could maybe make that introduction or have that initial conversation? Is it that someone in my family has a connection to the sports team, and so we could make that introduction to the athletic director and go from there. And so this is also a nice tool. And then again, EDC and that prevention collaboration resource has a nice worksheet for folks to identify new partners. So who is it you want to think about bringing to the table, and how could you go about identifying how you're going to make that happen? And then thinking in this general sort of, as we're kind of like narrowing to more specific things here, thinking about how we do this, ensuring we're doing it in a culturally competent way. And so the link to the resource where I pulled this from is right here at the bottom. And just thinking about your ability to be reflective of the community that you're serving, to ensure that you are addressing issues of racial equity, to be thinking about not just in the services you're providing, or not just in the communication that you're doing, that folks are represented, visually, or that you're thoughtful in the language you use, but thinking about how you're doing this throughout the entire strategic prevention framework. How are you making sure that this happens from assessment all the way to evaluation, that this is part of your sustainability planning? And so again, education, that it's not one person who's kind of the holder of the the why and the how, but that you're really being deliberate and not making assumptions about what people know or don't know. You're providing ongoing capacity building opportunities around this. This idea of cultural humility, you know, it's interesting. I think a lot of folks are moving away from the term cultural competence because that kind of denotes this idea that like, I've got it, I'm competent in this, I've gotten some training, I feel good about what we're at. And I think what we're becoming more and more aware of, that what is really needed is a posture of cultural humility and realizing that there is always more to learn. There's always more to learn about other people's experiences. There's always more to learn about how we do prevention and how all of those pieces of what we do have a different impact, and that we need to be mindful and thoughtful of those, and that in so many of the things we do, that there is some really clear, if not implicit, then for sure explicit bias and structural racism that's happening, and that is the reason that health inequities exist, and that it's only with becoming aware of those and recognizing them and then actively working to challenge them that we really can make a difference. And so this idea of being humble and recognizing that what it's really about is cultural humility is the key to all of this, I think. And then, you know, thinking about in all of this that we're doing of being purposeful and building connections with culturally relevant organizations, making sure that you're, you know, finding ways to connect with populations that not only serve, but are made up of the folks that you are, you want to make sure have a voice and are represented in the things that you're working on. And it can help you identify, you know, formal and informal leaders in what you're doing. In all of this, we're going to keep coming back to this point that I think the difference in today's conversation from what we've talked about before in building capacity is this is about taking this to that next level now, to think about how you make all of this more formal. How do you develop policies and practices? How do you, as part of your increased work around this, as part of your increased collaboration, how do you make this something that you say, and every 6 months we're going to look at this, or we're going to use this tool to evaluate it, and then we're going to think about where we are 6 months from now, and we're going to evaluate it again, and we're going to see what we still have to work on. How do you think about making sure that you have policies and that you write those policies down of, we're going to, you know, partner with an organization who every, you know, so many months is going to work with us on some training and some formalized exercises around this, and really that this is going to become part of what we do and the language we use and all of these things. And as we said, you know, obviously materials should reflect the culture, preferred language, and background of those that you're serving, those that are you're representing in your county. And being really deliberate about this. You know, this is something that takes time and thought and open and candid conversations about it. This one came from the CADCA resource, and I know some of these are a little bit hard to read, but I because this webinar today was about really sharing the tools and resources, I wanted you to be able to have just a quick like visual snapshot of what this one looks like. This is in the cultural competence primer. And I like this idea of having something that's this more formalized tool that you can really sit down at a meeting and go through with folks and be honest. You know, I like the way this one is phrased to say, is it adequately addressed? You know, is it enough that we talked about it once, 8 months ago? Maybe that's not, our what we're going to decide together means it's been adequately addressed. And if we feel like it hasn't been, how are we starting to create a plan around this? What are we going to do to address it? What's our next step going to be? And then having a structure for how often this happens. So, we look at this checklist every 6 months at our, biannual meeting. This is part of what we do, or we check in about this every month. We check to see where the progress is. We said we were going to address this. What happened with it? Did it happen? Maybe we think about having a specific subcommittee that does some of this work. I also, they have a variety of tools throughout that one primer, but I wanted to pull this one up in particular because I think it really met the focus on capacity was really a good fit for what we were talking about today. This idea of, again, making a formal plan, how do you go about seeking this input and thinking about coalition candidates, how do we decide who we want to invite to the table, and how do we make sure that that's happening? Being really clear about, you guys know that this is like my thing that I talk about all the time, that increasing coalition capacity is never about just getting more bodies at the table or checking off the checklist of, great, I've got all 12 sectors represented. What it's really about is, what is the need? We need to have someone with this particular technical expertise at our table. We need to have someone that can bring law enforcement experience. We need to have someone who has the ability to speak out and be heard about social host, whatever it might be, and then to go through these steps to say, great, who could do that for us? We're going to look for those leaders. We're going to be clear in what the ask is and creating a job description. Again, avoiding like, oh, great, I have one of those from the faith community. I have somebody who is a person of color who's now sitting on my coalition. I have this, this idea of like that this is a checklist. We need to just, put that to the side and think about, why are we inviting people to the table, and let's be really clear in communicating that in doing the work that we're doing. And then this is just a little snippet, but I really, really like, and I think it's definitely worth taking a look at if it's not something that you're already doing and have, guidance around this. I definitely think I like this, speaking of checklists, I like this checklist. It's not a beginning and an ending. It's not feeling like, great, check, check, check. We checked all the boxes, so we're done doing this. But I think to be able to have a place to center the conversation, to have some concrete things to bring to the table, to talk about, to make a plan for doing where you see areas that maybe you're not doing this already. I do like this checklist, and what I like about it is it also, again, looks at how thinking in the context of cultural competence and health inequity, it talks about how to do it through each step of the spiff. I think we often, even though we know that cultural competence resides in the middle of the flower, I think sometimes we still think of it as its own piece or its own step of like, great, we're going to talk about cultural competence, or we're going to do some training around it. We're going to think about how to have diverse representation, or we're going to think about how folks are represented in our materials. But truly where the work happens and where it starts to make a real difference in the work that you're doing is being very explicit and thinking about it through each step of the spiff. So what does this mean for assessment, and what do we need to do, and who do we need to have at the table at that point? And what does it mean for capacity? And what does it mean for planning and for evaluation? And so I didn't include the whole tool here. I wanted you just to see what it looks like, but definitely recommend taking a look at the cultural competence primer so that you can see how they have it in there. And then the last piece about this that I wanted to share, this website at the bottom, this racial equity tools, has a ton of resources. This was given to me at a training that I did with someone else, and this was the reference that she gave for it. But I just circled back to her, and I'm waiting to hear back still about the specific link, because this just kind of takes you to their main homepage. And so when I send the follow-up materials for the webinar, I will send the specific link, or I'll send the resource itself. It's a little bit, the whole resource itself is a little hard to read. It's like teeny tiny print, but it's so good, even though it's really dense. So I tried to just kind of represent here this idea of thinking about what we're doing in building collaboration and coordination to address racial equity and health equity, that it happens along a continuum from being exclusionary or things that, whether we're again doing it implicitly or explicitly, maybe exacerbating health inequities in our community and racial inequalities in our community, to moving down that continuum and thinking about where we start to acknowledge it and we start to implement some specific strategies and things that we're working on, and those kinds of things start to create a culture shift, to moving to actually working to actively advance racial equity and advance health equity in our communities. And that this is all tied together with this idea of, you know, how we kind of move along this continuum of networking and information sharing to then having more formalized partnerships and agreement, to having policies and practices that are written and actually changing and shaping the structure of what we do within our coalition or what we maybe do within our agencies. What then, you know, multiple agencies in our community think about adopting, and businesses, and then how we really think about that as a system. And when you, if you look at this resource, they have it grouped in a whole bunch of different areas. And I just wanted to share with you, you know, they think about culture, they think about people, they think about structures and systems. But what seemed really relevant to us today was the section where they talk about the community and thinking about access, involvement, and partnerships. And from that, being exclusionary. And so thinking about who really is around your table when it's time to be making decisions and creating partnerships, to moving towards being more intentionally inclusive. And so moving down that continuum, developing ongoing relationships with communities of color, or thinking about how to have really more formal established relationships with those in your community that your data is showing is suffering, you know, those disparate populations that are experiencing more consequences or have higher rates of consumption than other folks in your community. And so really thinking about where you are and where you sit along this continuum and how we can continue to move forward with that. So I'm going to stop here for just a minute before we shift a little bit to talking about how to strengthen and kind of formalize collaboration along a continuum. I'm going to just stop here and see if anybody has any thoughts or reflections about anything that I've said so far. And Jody, if you have anything, if you can read anything that's coming up in the chat for us.
Or nothing in the chat so far.
And just, I mean, how is this resonating so far? You know, share in the chat. Is this, you know, yep, knew this already? Is it like, is there something that's kind of jumped out at you so far that's like, oh, that is something to think about, or that seems like it would be useful? Anybody want to unmute and share an example of having done any of this that you think might be helpful for others to hear?
Deanna's sharing, I like having more concrete tools for working on cultural competency.
Great.
And Stacy, I think Stacy's agreed with that she likes the cultural competency checklist.
Oh, great. Has anybody, how many of you have used that before? How many of you have used the tools from the cultural competence primer? I mean, that one's been around a little while. Does anybody want to share an experience of using these tools with a coalition?
Few more comments that the tools are helpful and
Great.
will be useful.
Great.
Amy said yes, so I'm not sure, maybe she wants to share. Amy, did you want to share something?
All right. Well, if you do, feel free to jump in.
Oh, here we go.
Okay,
There's
great.
something, this is from Joy. Approaching cultural diversity from the context of need is great. It occurs to me that this is a way to include those from the Muslim community. Alcohol is not an issue by faith, but smoking is widespread and can bring now. Sorry, I'm trying to get down there. Oh, their comment may be cut off. I'll bring them to the table. There we go.
Great. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Joy. I appreciate that. Great. So let's move, let's kind of shift gears a little bit and think about this continuum related to what I keep calling collaboration. I think really has, what I thought was interesting in working on this is I have a couple of tools that I like to look at and utilize that really all have this kind of same idea. So we're going to look at a couple of them. But this idea of really moving from less formalized relationships with partners, where maybe you're just, sending your newsletter every month, or you've invited someone to come to your meeting, but they really just, they come, they hang out for lunch, they listen, they, take your agenda back with them, and then you see them again in a month, when you meet again. So this idea of moving from whether you want to call that networking, or you want to call it, the word just went right out of my head. You want to call that networking, or, this initial kind of like cooperation, to then really moving down a continuum to where you're supporting each other's activities. Maybe I'm putting something in my newsletter about something that's happening at your agency that you want to make sure that folks know is going on. And then you're going to put something in your newsletter about what's happening. That at my staff meeting, I'm going to make sure I say, hey, and don't forget, the Tobacco Coalition has this thing going on, and this is a great opportunity for us to support what they're doing, and also to bring some things about what we're doing to reach the folks that we're reaching. Or thinking about it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so let's think about how we might partner together on an activity while they're really working this month to have some heightened awareness, or a particular push right now to get out their phone number, or during the pandemic to be making sure that there's more recognition of when someone might benefit from services, and might want to be able to offer that to somebody. And so that starts to kind of like continue to move down this continuum to thinking about coordination. Maybe is there a project that we're going to work on together? So we've got a couple things we're working on. We've got a couple initiatives. And I think this is where it can get tricky sometimes with prevention work and coalition work, is thinking about when I'm working on, my strategies for my grant, and my coalition is working on some really specific things, and I want to partner with this other organization, this is where there starts to have to be some of that back and forth to say, let's think about how we can accomplish what we want to accomplish, and help you accomplish what you want to accomplish, by us both taking on some shared responsibility for some things, and being really clear about, I'm willing to do this and to share this and to take this on, and you're willing to do this, and that there's more communication and coordination that's happening around that. And then moving down in this example to some to full collaboration, where there's really some formal agreements. Maybe you have a memorandum of understanding, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, that's in writing, very clear of, I'm going to, we're going to work with the police department, and we're going to provide some education for some events that they're doing, and we're going to be a resource to their officers to talk about what we're hearing and what we're seeing that's happening in the community. And then that part of their collaboration is that they are going to let us know when they're doing compliance checks, and they're going to partner with us so that they can, when they go out to do their compliance checks, they're also going to hand out information about the tips, the classes that we're offering that are upcoming. And that it's more than just, my kind of saying in a meeting, like, hey, here's these flyers about tips. Could you hand them out when you go out, when you're out in the community, to actually saying, this is how we do it. This is our practice. When our officers go out and do some visits before they do compliance checks, or when our officers go and do their follow-up, they bring this with them. They give it to the person, they ensure that your contact information is included. It's this idea of, being purposeful and saying what we're doing is great, but how do we then make this more formalized? How do I know that like you're doing it and it's great, but how do we get on the same page to put it in writing or put it in an email or put it in an MOU or just talk about it out loud to say, okay, so my understanding is, we're going to offer this and your understanding is you're going to offer this. And that really is what builds that it's shared resources and capacity, and again leads to sustainability, because I'm not the one sort of thinking like, okay, every year in September I have to remember to send that email with the updated list of trainings. Like, they are coming looking for it because they're saying, oh, it's part of what we do to hand out this packet and we ran out of packets. It's not like, oh, we ran out of packets 6 months ago and so we haven't really been giving them out. It's about being more specific in what you're doing. And this is just a snippet of this tool that's available. There's a couple of, I like that it talks about like what it is, and then it also gives some great examples of what it looks like. And so I'll share a couple. And so thinking about, what it might look like for networking, again, like, just going back and forth and sharing what we're doing. We're going to go to an interagency meeting and I'm going to talk about what I'm doing and you're going to talk about what you're doing. To moving to cooperation, that we publicize one another's programs. Maybe we write letters of support for each other's grant applications. This one often in the work that I had done, I ended up having a great relationship with our local school district. And this was somewhere that we really found a lot of support in each other. This one person in particular, her and I were the point folks often for our respective, organizations to be doing some grant writing. And so it was great that we had this relationship that I could, look to her for information or data, or she could look to me if she would call and say, I'm pulling this grant together and I need this information about Iowa Youth Survey. And I would say, oh, great, I already have it in this really packaged way that'll be easy to share. And yeah, we'd love it if you'd write us into your grant proposal that you want us to be the ones to offer this parenting program, 4 times next year. And she would say, oh, great. And I'd say, but I need someone from a school district to say that they're on board, with this thing that we're doing. And she, here's how this might benefit you. And again, sort of took that going when I started from sitting next to each other at an interagency meeting and saying like, hey, here's our newsletter, or, here's the flyer about the thing we're doing, to really moving further down this continuum and very purposely cultivating that relationship to move down that continuum by being available, by inviting to share information, and then by inviting there to be more formal collaboration and agreement. Can we put this in, in writing that we're going to do this together? Can I write you into this project? Can you think about us writing us into your project? I also like this. This one has, I just took this one snippet from the top of this resource. I'll give you a quick little, I don't know if you can see it. It's not pretty in color because I don't have a color printer, but this is a really nice one to be able to share also because they did a beautiful job with it. But, again, to me, it's like different words, but similar concept of how you go from, they really even have on this other end, like what happens before networking, which is I'm over here doing my thing and you're over here doing your thing. They call it immuring, to networking, coordinating, cooperating, collaborating, and then to really think about full integration. How do we have some really formal things that we look at? And then they talk about the capacities needed for each of these. In the beginning, obviously you don't need any capacity because you're all doing your own things. But as you move down the continuum, you really need clear communication channels. Who's the person from my organization or my coalition? And who's the point person from your organization or coalition that we know that that's the person that will make sure that messages and information gets conveyed. Thinking about, creating shared objectives and shared goals. Why do we want to communicate? How is it going to benefit me? How is it going to benefit you? And the more that we can move that forward and move down the continuum, the more we're able to formalize and strengthen those relationships. Recommend this, this resource is really nice as well for taking a look at this and thinking about, I would imagine this one would be fun While this is up, I'll give a brief example. I was thinking about, how do you do a lot of these things? I should have actually planned for us to do this. How do you think about then doing these things virtually? This one would be a fun one to just, actually, let me see if I can do it real quick. All right, I'm going to let you guys annotate. Don't go crazy. Everybody should have the ability. Everyone should have the ability to annotate on their screen right now. So here's what I want you to think about. I want you to think about in your, so if you're all members of my coalition, and we're at a coalition meeting, I'm going to say, hey, today I really want to think about our relationships with some different collaborative partners and how we might strengthen those. And of course, we've already had lots of conversations about this and why and what we might need from each other. So I'm going to go through a list of some of the partners that we currently have. And let's think about, where along this continuum we might see our relationship with them. So where would you say, so you guys go ahead and all do this. So if you hover, I think at the bottom or at the top of your screen where it says more options, you'll see the ability to annotate. There's like a little penciler, it says annotate. You're going to get this little toolbar. For this one, I recommend the tool that says draw, but you could also use the stamp tool and pick yourself a little stamp. And what I'd love for you to do is when I name an organization in our community, I want you to mark on here where you see our collaboration with them. So the first one I'm going to say is the school district. So where do you think our collaboration is with our one of our local school districts? In my case, I'm going to say the district that I worked most often with, we were probably sort of, I think we were definitely like here sometimes. Great. So a virtual coalition meeting, you could do some of those checklists this way. You could go back to the, you could think about the other continuum that we had and sort of writing those across. You could have, throw on a slide. I'm trying to think of the term specifically that they had. You could put on this slide, networking, cooperation, coordination, full collaboration. Great. Okay, great. So this is really helpful. Maybe I might take a screenshot of it for myself and paste it in a document off to the side so that I know this is like where we were at for this one. I'm going to clear all the drawings. I'm going to say, all right, great. It looked like we had a fair amount of collaboration with our local school district. I could see lots of like things down this end. Maybe we lead that into a conversation specifically about that. But for today's purposes, let's think now about your maybe your local faith community. So whether you have like a what do you call it, like an interfaith council group that meets, or there's a specific faith community that you collaborate with, where do you see your collaboration with your faith community on here? So is it like kind of more over here of like they do their thing and we do ours? Maybe it's like some networking here that we send them some things to put in their bulletin. Great. All right. Oh, I actually see the chat now, which is kind of cool. Somebody says they don't. Okay. Hopefully everybody got their options. Great. So you can see how you might be able to use this virtually. So I'm going to clear all the drawings, and then I don't think we'll annotate again, but I'm going to leave it in case, unless somebody starts to abuse it, and then I'll disable it for everybody, but I'll leave it for now. But you can see how you might actually use this tool with your coalition in the current time, or even, I see a lot of things going forward, ending up being a hybrid, even when we can go back to doing things in person, that doing something like this, while, we all love Post-its and sticky charts and things around the room, that certainly we could do this in this collaborative way through the screen as well. And so hold on, I'm just gonna clear everybody's drawings here. Great. Okay, so let's see. Oh, and I can see the chat now, which is nice. I wonder if it's going to disappear for me again once I get going here. So I want to share, I have one more video that I wanted to share with you guys. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about this. So this one, oh, hold on. All right, I'm going to, whoops, that's not what I meant to do. I am going to disable annotation just so it doesn't distract anybody. Great. Okay. So here's what I want you to think about while you're watching this video. I don't know if some of you have seen this before. I actually had never watched this one all the way, even though I know I'd seen the snippet a couple times every time I have looked to SAMHSA. I really like this video series that they did. I think they called it Prevention Conversations. And this one was specific to thinking about preventing opioid misuse and engaging non-traditional partners. And I want you to think about, as you listen, where you hear that they took relationships from something that maybe was more like networking or one-way information sharing and worked on formalizing that more. And then I want you to also think about how you and your community might also be able to even take what they did one step further and create some additional strengthened or formalized relationships around the things that she shares in the video. So I'm going to go ahead. It's just a couple of minutes.
In order to do our prevention work in the state of Pennsylvania, we have worked with some non-traditional partners, which include real estate agents, veterinarians, and funeral directors. So a lot of times when people are selling houses, you have open houses, you have people come in, and it's not uncommon for people that misuse and abuse prescription drugs to access those prescriptions through these open houses. So the real estate agents are able to talk to potential sellers about safe storage for when they have their open houses. Real estate agents at first were not necessarily on board. We didn't necessarily have the buy-in, but it's really good to find a champion, somebody that can recognize the goodness in that cause and is willing to reach out to other real estate agents to increase the buy-in so that more are on board, which is what we've seen happen in our different counties. Another one of our partners is funeral directors, and we have a couple of our counties that are working with them. When it first started out, it was more like the funeral directors were an avenue to get information out to people. So perhaps they would have information about prescription drug misuse and abuse in the funeral parlor or something like that. But again, we're kind of institutionalizing it so that anybody that comes through that has a family member that's passed away, we talk about safe disposal. We talk about our prescription drop boxes and the various locations where those family members can drop off medication. So the smaller funeral homes that perhaps people have used for years and years and years are the ones that you can go to first, and you can say, hey, have you heard about this? Would you be willing to do something? And that's kind of how you can get things started. We've also been partnering with veterinarians in our state. Blair County has been one that is working the most with veterinarians right now. So what is being seen is that sometimes people will actually injure their animals in order to take them to the veterinarian to get specific drugs. There was an article recently about a case in Kentucky, and a woman was basically cutting her dog and taking it into the vet and requesting tramadol specifically. Blair County has not seen anything that extreme, but at this point it's just making veterinarians aware that this is an issue, and it's something that we could see get worse, especially with the prescription drug monitoring program, which is just coming into place in Pennsylvania. We expect that people's access to medications will dry up. And veterinarians are certainly another way that you can get access to medications. The key lessons that we've learned about reaching out to new partners is that building relationships is just so important. I probably can't stress that enough. It really is all about relationships. Another one that we have learned is sometimes building those relationships can be very difficult, especially if there's a history of past difficulties. So it's really important in building relationships that you can find the right gatekeeper, because there's usually one or two people that might be influencers. So they might influence a lot of different people in that specific community. And if you can find that person and you're able to build that relationship, it will just make anything that you try to do in the community much more easier.
So if you want to unmute or you want to share in the chat, I'm curious like what you thought about how they went about strengthening some of those partnerships or more formalizing some of those partnerships. And if anyone has thoughts on how they might have even taken some of that a step further, or if there's something similar that you have done in your own community that you would like to share. Does anybody want to
Can you see
unmute
the
or
chat
share?
box, Claire?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, what?
Can you see the chat box?
I cannot see the chat box
Okay.
again.
Okay,
Nope.
there's some comments in there. One
Okay,
comment from Nancy is, I never would have thought about veterinarians. Talking to the veterinarians, Stacy said it isn't unusual for employees in the vet clinic to divert opioids either. And John said to think outside the box. And Deanna shared, it was great to see the brainstorming, then educating those that they wanted to collaborate with in the community with specific information and optional behaviors.
Great. All right, thank you. You know, I was thinking watching it too, similarly to the example that I was giving when, you know, talking about, like, for example, collaborating with law enforcement, you know, again, of any time that we're able to take something from, you know, hey, can I offer this training, to say, hey, can I offer this training every 6 months? Or can I come in and do a training every time you have a new staff member? And then, you know, will you agree that you're going to put up our flyers and our materials in your waiting room? Or if you are able to build this partnership with funeral homes, and I know that the agency that I work for at one point had a strong campaign around that, working about proper disposal of medication and thinking about that. You know, how can you go from, like, great, they're on my list that I'm going to drop off a new batch of flyers for them. Hey, how's it going? You know, thanks, to, you know, saying like, hey, you know, can we sit down and talk about it? Can I, you know, when will you hand these out? I always, you know, thinking about like things with schools, you know, schools are super busy. They have a lot going on. And often we have it on our list when we're doing some sort of campaign of like, okay, I'm going to drop the flyers off at the school, or I have a coalition member that's going to do it, you know, great. And then how many of us have experienced walking into a middle school for another meeting for something else and seeing, you know, the beautiful posters that you dropped off, like sitting in a little stack on top of like a really tall filing cabinet. And so it, you know, what is it benefiting us and what is it benefiting them if that resource is just, you know, sitting on top of a filing cabinet and nobody's seeing it? It's certainly a benefit to them that we know that, you know, good prevention has an impact on attendance and kids' health and, you know, their learning and all of these things. And so often it does not take a lot of convincing for schools to want to partner with us. And then similarly for us, you know, schools are definitely a partnership that we often want to cultivate, because we want, you know, they have access to often a huge, you know, population that we're trying to target. And so to be able to have something that's more formalized and saying, you know, hey, we're going to drop these off. Will you agree to hang them in 5 different places in your school? And would you work out a system so that somebody, you know, a student that you identify or someone on your staff once a month goes around and makes sure that they're all still hanging? And if you need more posters, someone on your end is going to contact us and let us know that you need some more. You know, and then now it's like something that folks are thinking about, you know, instead of just someone on the other end saying like, great, thanks for that resource. You know, we think you're great, thanks, but we're going to put it over here. You know, now there's someone on the other end that's saying like, oh, I'm going to go check and see if those posters are up. Oh, I wonder if they've got a new poster, or, you know, this one's been up in this hallway for a long time, and I think the kids are like walking by and not seeing it. Wouldn't it be fun to put it in the weight room and stick them up on the ceiling so that everybody, you know, sees them when they go in there next week, or whatever it might be, in a world where we're all still in person together? Although potentially still, if there's some hybrid or some kids doing that. They, though, could also be great partners right now as we think about this lens of what to do during times of COVID, to, you know, extend that to say, you know, hey, I know in the past we've always dropped off these posters, but obviously right now we know there aren't as many people coming in and out of your building, or maybe this isn't the best way to reach folks right now. What do you suggest? You know, is it possible that during a Zoom event that you're having, you could highlight this and show it? Or could you ask a teacher to put it on the wall behind them, or to, have it available in some other way, because we can't put the posters up in it, where it's maybe not the best use of resources right now to put these posters in the community or in the school right now. Could you, make a page of your school's newsletter be this resource that we're trying to get out and share with folks? And so, again, thinking about how do you put some of that responsibility and delineate those responsibilities of, here's what I'm going to be responsible for, and here's what, they're going to be responsible for, and then here's what I get out of it, and here's what you get out of it.
There's a few more comments.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
there's
please.
a few more comments in the
Sure.
box here.
Yeah, thanks.
One is working with animal shelters,
Yeah.
which kind of off of what you started your video with. And then bankers.
Oh.
Cheryl and Leanne both shared that bankers have been great as far as posting information regarding gambling. And loan officers are often very open to taking in information. And
Thank you.
yeah,
And that's a new one for
financial
me too. I hadn't thought about that.
yeah, it's a great idea.
Thank you. So really what it all comes down to, regardless of whichever continuum that you're looking at, what it's about is being purposeful, making this a priority, educating yourself as well as those that are doing this work with you, and then creating a process and policies and practices. And as you're able to continue to make things more formal. So again, maybe it starts out as a conversation, and then maybe I formalize it in an email, and then maybe I move toward formalizing it with an actual memorandum of understanding. And then we have a plan, again, we have a process and we have a plan to evaluate this collaborative relationship and to revisit it. So I'm going to sign that MOU, or I'm going to, send this email to say, great, I really appreciate that you're going to take a bunch of our posters, and that, you'll identify someone to check them every 6 months, every, 2 weeks, you'll let me know. But then I also make a plan that in a month, I'm going to go back to that partner and say, how's that working? Were you able to do that? Is there something we need to change here? So really, you can have all these different colored fancy models, but in the end, I think that this is what it really boils down to. And then just briefly, talked a couple times about MOUs. And I know when I used to work in prevention, sometimes this felt a little nebulous for me. And what an MOU is really just basically we're going to put in writing your understanding and my understanding of what we're each going to offer. What are the services or the resources that I'm going to provide? How is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? And so, and this can be really formal or not as formal. If you're going to do this, if your coalition has a 501c3 and you have an agency that's a nonprofit, maybe it's pretty formal. Maybe you have one that exists already, and you're going to be really clear about that you're going to be sharing funding and who the funder is going to be and how that's going to be allocated. But maybe this is also about creating an understanding that, my coalition isn't a 501c3. We're just an established coalition, and we want to work with another local coalition, or we want to work with the school district or the Chamber of Commerce, that we just want to make sure we're outlining and writing what we want to do together, what we want to achieve. And then that you're going to offer this funding, or we're going to offer these resources or this space or whatever it might be. That is just putting everything really clearly in writing. The first resource that I have listed at the bottom is where this particular information on the slide came from. It's a really nice resource. It's this Strengthening Partnerships Toolkit, and they reference quite a bit some CADCA materials, and I liked it also because when you look up sample MOUs, you often get a lot of sites that are connected to different lawyers or different organizations, which is great. I liked this one because it was particular to prevention, which I thought was really helpful. I also appreciated this resource because it had some, the first one was the MOU. The second one, I think, is the one, the Strengthening Partnerships Toolkit. And I liked it because it not only had a couple of examples of MOUs that you could use, it also had some nice meeting checklist, and it had a sample like introductory letter if you wanted to introduce your coalition to somebody and invite them to come do something or be part of. So I thought these are both resources I think that are worth taking a look at. And that brings us to kind of bringing this all home of, you know, great, these all seem like really great ideas and tools. And how do we do this right now? And I tried to pepper a little bit of that as I was talking. But you know, I think in all of these, just being creative and thinking about how you might be able to utilize, I think the tools do lend themselves well to doing virtually. You know, maybe creating, you know, recreating a checklist, as we said, like doing something that involves letting people like annotate or put different stars. I was thinking about, I wasn't able to find, so I didn't send it, but I promised you guys I'll recreate it. So I'm going to tell you again and hold me to it this time. I was thinking about the bingo sheet that I used to use with coalitions to identify, like, you know, we really need somebody who's good at social media, or we really are looking for somebody who is part of this population that's been really hard for us to reach. You know, something like that, you could throw that up on a slide and have people put their, use the text annotation to put their name of like, oh, you know, I know somebody from the Interfaith Council and I can put my name in that box. And, you know, I know somebody who, you know, I'm really good at social media. I'd be willing to take that on. You know, there's a lot of things that you could put up on the screen and have people interact with, as well as doing it as part of a discussion on video. I think the part that I find, you know, needing to be a little more intentional right now, and I'm curious for those of you who are like really doing the work at the community level right now, is that relationship building piece. And I think trying to be purposeful into planning some of that like buffer time that happens. You know, you might still do a networking meeting that happens virtually, but what I find sometimes is things are much more agenda focused. Like, great, everybody's here, you know, we're going to go around and everybody's going to share what we're doing, and now everybody's done that, so, you know, thanks. You miss that, like, oh, I'm going to ask this question of the person who's next to me, like, I want to know more about what they're doing, or I want to know if I can send my flyer to them, or that conversation that happens at the beginning or at the end, you know, as you're just getting ready to go out the door, that ends up being the thing of like, oh, you know, I didn't know that, you know, my grant doesn't provide, you know, food for something, but I didn't know that this local organization, you know, is happy to, you know, provide that for this. All you have to do is fill out this form and ask. And, you know, I wouldn't have known that if I didn't sort of like overhear a snippet of conversation that was happening at the end between two people as I was walking out the door. And so I've really tried to be thoughtful lately about how to create those opportunities to create like a bumper at the beginning or end of a meeting for some of that more informal conversation to happen. To think about putting people into breakout rooms for that conversation to happen, you know, at the start of a meeting, like, hey, we're going to just throw everybody into a breakout with a couple of people, and there's not a specific topic, but just kind of talk about, you know, what's going on. And that's when some of that conversation more organically tends to happen, the same as it would in those, you know, small groupings before the meeting really gets started. I think about things like, you know, instead of, I got established a lot of relationships in the communities that I worked in because I wasn't from there originally, by just going and having coffee with folks. And, you know, Jen Stocco will tell you, like, I'm a big proponent of that, of saying like, great, you know what, you know, we're bringing somebody new into our office, like tell them 3 people they could go have coffee with. And then when they do that and come back, then, you know, I want them to tell me 3 more people now that they know that they want to go have coffee with. And so setting up virtual, you know, coffee dates with folks, you know, hey, I got your name from Jen, you know, she says you're really involved in the community in Northeast Iowa. And I'm really trying to find out more about what's going on there and how I can be connected. Do you have 15 minutes on Monday that we could like just hop on in the morning with our coffee before, you know, and chat? And I don't care that your kids are running around in the background, because my kid's going to be climbing all over me at that point. I think just really thinking about how to be purposeful in doing this in a virtual format can be helpful. So I'm mindful of the time and that I
We
have
have
been
a few
doing a lot
comments
of
in the-
talking. So
We have a few
yeah,
comments in the box here.
thank you.
Erin shared that one of the trainings she was in this week did that. They called it a virtual water cool. If you have the most
Yeah.
recent version of Zoom, you can bounce to different breakout rooms.
Great. Oh, interesting. All right.
Know that.
What
And
else?
then Amy asked, what are a few recommendations you would have for coalitions that are entry level and have the same 4 people attending every month without growth?
Yeah, so if you want to put your email in the chat, Jody's going to capture that for me, and I'm happy to send you additionally some things if it's helpful. I always go back to this idea of identifying the need, so like, it's great that you've got 4 people. Like, what is it that you're trying to accomplish and who do you need to accomplish it? Do you need somebody from the school? Do you need somebody from the business community? Do you need a youth? Do you need, who are you trying to target with your strategies? Are you targeting college students or older adults? Like, making sure, I mean, this is a broader question for sure. So I'm going to send you lots of resources. But to start with that. So, well, we really want to, we said we're going to do school-based programs. We definitely need to get somebody from the school on board early. Great, start with that. So the 4 people around your table, who knows somebody that works at the school district? Maybe you know the secretary that you see every morning. And so you can ask the secretary, who makes decisions? Who gets to decide if a program happens or not? Who's the person that like signs the paper, but who's the person that their opinion is really like listened to? It's really about identifying the need first of what we need around the table, and then thinking about who's the person that can fill that need, and then thinking about where's the connection with that person and what's in it for them, and how are we going to ask them and involve them in being part of what we're doing. Is that helpful?
It appears that maybe your information is popular, so you might want to send it to the group
I
when
will.
you send it
Yes.
out.
Okay,
Very
great. Okay, so I'm going to send additional, I'm just going to call it like capacity building resources. Oh my gosh, you guys, that's like my jam.
And also just a reminder, I did add the evaluation link
Oh,
in the
great.
chat box for them to please fill out before they leave.
Oh, great. Thank you. I was going to get to that in just a minute, but that explains why I already got like a pop-up on my phone that someone responded already. I was like, how is someone doing the evaluation response? How could they even have seen it? Thanks, Jody. Yeah, let's keep the discussion in the chat going, but I will just these last couple of things so we don't lose anybody. If you need to get on to your next things and maybe need 2 minutes to, take a break in between. I did want to have folks save the date. We do these the first Friday of every month. I try to be good about, letting folks know ahead. But, just put the first Friday of every month, although not this January, it'll be the second Friday because the first Friday is the holiday. But the first Friday of every month, block it out on your calendar from 1 to 2:30. Once you sign up for one of these, I put you on the distribution list unless you ask me not to. So I will get folks the flyer. If you're here, you'll get the flyer for how to register. But we have somebody who's going to talk to us and do kind of a harm reduction 101, which I'm really excited about. We've got a few other things in the works for the upcoming months that I'll let you know as soon as we have some save the dates for those. Just a reminder, following today's webinar, you'll get a copy of the materials. You'll get a link to the recording. I will definitely pull together some additional resources for you all and send it, as well as your CEU certificate. It does take me really like a full 2 weeks. Sorry that it takes a little bit of time, but I will get things out to folks. You can always email me with questions, comments, concerns. And then Jody's going to paste, or she has, and maybe she'll repaste again, the link. I do appreciate your feedback. SurveyMonkey recently changed what you're allowed to do with their free account. And so I did streamline the survey. You might notice if you've done these other months, I streamlined the survey a little bit, but good news for all of you is it's even like quicker. It now says it takes like less than 2 minutes to just real quick let us know what was helpful, what was not as helpful. I do look to these. The reason we did this whole series and the reason today we really focused on concrete tools and resources was that was a request and some feedback from a previous webinar that we did. And so I definitely look at them and make adjustments. I tried to talk more slowly today after someone said it was hard to follow, that I was talking too quickly. I'll still keep working on that, but I did hear that feedback as well. also, this is a prevention webinar series. Sometimes we do get feedback about them being really focused on that end of the continuum. That's really purposeful because that's where our funding comes from. And also was actually a directive from SAMHSA that we needed to have a really good structure for providing training to our prevention folks. And so this webinar series meets that particular need, but I'm always thankful when we have folks from further down the continuum to round out the conversation and bring in some great examples and are always welcome. But if you wonder why we spend a lot of time talking about prevention, that's why, because it's a prevention webinar series. And so I know I talked a lot. You guys know I get like, as much as I always want to have good discussion, I get so excited when I start talking about capacity and collaborative relationships, but we've got just a minute if there's any other thoughts in the chat. I'm also happy to stay on if anyone's got additional questions or wants to talk about anything. But for those of you who are going to hop off, I appreciate any feedback that you have to offer. I really appreciate your time this afternoon and the work that all of you are doing. I think this is a really difficult time for everybody, obviously, and especially if you're someone that's really doing work that's grounded in a community that's challenging with everything going on. And so I want all of you, even though I don't know all of you, I certainly appreciate all of you and the work that you're doing and how you are, I'm sure, managing probably some days better than others to balance all the things that are on your plate. And so I'm thankful for all of you and the work that you do. And I'm happy if I can be of any support to that. But thank you to all of you. I hope that you have a great weekend. And if you've got anything else to say, throw it in the chat.
You have a lot of thank yous.
Oh, great. I'm going to stop. So now I can see the chat, which
There
is
you
so
go.
lovely.
Yeah, go through it there.
Let me give you my email again. Yeah, no problem, Kelly. Claire Jones at idph.iowa.gov. All right, that's me. Thanks, guys. Oh, I gotta go scroll back to the chat now to see all these folks that are saying goodbye and thank you. Thanks, everybody. We had good. How many did we have? How many did we have on the call when we had everybody?
It was right almost at 100.
Oh my gosh, great. Great. I'm so glad. I'm scrolling through to see if I missed anything. So nice. Let's see. Just got some thank yous. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. All right. I think we can stop the recording.
Here we go.
Thank you.